Ireland is often thought of as an island of mist, myths, and ancient castles, but the story of its people goes much deeper than we've been told. Imagine stepping back in time, thousands of years ago, to when the first humans set foot on Irish soil. These were no mythical warriors, but real people, with lives shaped by the landscape around them, people whose genetic fingerprints are still present in Ireland's population today. But where did they come from? What is the true story behind Ireland's ancient inhabitants? For years, scholars believed that Ireland's history began with the Celts, around 2,500 years ago. But recent DNA research has shattered this narrative and revealed something far more complex. The first settlers of Ireland didn't arrive with the Celts, they arrived after the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. These early inhabitants were hunter-gatherers, likely traveling from mainland Europe as the ice sheets retreated. The DNA left behind by these people tells a fascinating tale. It's not just the Celtic genes we associate with modern-day Ireland, but a mix of ancient genetic markers that reveal Ireland's much older roots. This first wave of settlers didn't just survive, they thrived. And their genetic legacy still pulses in the veins of the Irish people today. In fact, scientists have found that a significant portion of modern Irish DNA can be traced back to these early hunter-gatherers. These were people with dark skin, light eyes, and a deep connection to the land they inhabited. Their descendants, though intermingled with later populations, still carry a piece of their ancient past. Fast forward a few thousand years to around 6,000 years ago. A new group arrives in Ireland, the Neolithic farmers. These people came from the Middle East, bringing agriculture and a whole new way of life. With them, they brought new genes, changing the Irish genetic landscape forever. These Neolithic farmers introduced the concept of settled farming communities, a stark contrast to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They were lighter-skinned, had darker hair, and carried a new set of genetic markers that are still visible in modern Irish DNA. But here's the twist, this wasn't just a peaceful migration. The Neolithic settlers interacted, traded, and even intermarried with the indigenous hunter-gatherers. The result? A genetic blend that forms the foundation of modern Irish DNA. Scientists now know that these early settlers were not isolated from one another, but formed a dynamic, evolving society, creating the first truly Irish genetic signature. As centuries passed, Ireland saw more waves of migration and cultural exchange. Around 4,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age, new groups arrived, people from the Mediterranean, as well as others from across Europe. These individuals brought with them innovations in metalworking, new technologies, and, of course, more genes. As a result, Irish genetic diversity expanded as these new populations integrated with the existing people. The Bronze Age brought even more complex genetic markers, particularly from Mediterranean regions, which left subtle traces in the Irish gene pool. But the most exciting part? These ancient migrations didn't just change the people of Ireland, they shaped the way the Irish interacted with the world. These early waves of settlers didn't come as invaders, they came as traders, farmers, and explorers, exchanging ideas, technologies, and bloodlines. And this mix is the genetic foundation of Ireland today. Now, when we look at the Irish people, we see more than just descendants of the Celts. We see the legacy of thousands of years of genetic evolution, each group contributing to the rich tapestry of Irish culture. The new studies show that the Irish are not a homogeneous group, but a blend of ancient peoples, each leaving their mark on the island's people and history. This genetic journey is not just a story of survival, it's a story of connection. The people of Ireland are, in many ways, the world's first truly connected people. And as we dive deeper into the genetic mysteries of Ireland, we realize that the history of the Irish is not just the history of one island, it's a story of migration, adaptation, and cultural exchange that stretches far beyond Ireland's shores. When we think of the Vikings, what usually comes to mind are raiders, warriors, and pillaging longboats. However, their impact on Ireland wasn't just destructive, it was transformative. The Viking influence on Ireland goes far beyond the historical accounts of battles and raids. The DNA of modern Irish people carries the hidden legacy of the Norsemen in ways we're only now beginning to fully understand. The Vikings first arrived on the Irish coast in the late 8th century, making their mark with brutal raids that targeted monasteries, churches, and settlements. But as time went on, their influence evolved. They didn't just come to conquer, they came to settle. Viking towns like Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick became vibrant cultural hubs, and the Norsemen slowly integrated into the fabric of Irish society. Now, thanks to modern genetic testing, we can uncover the true extent of Viking influence on Ireland's genetic makeup. Studies have revealed that certain regions in Ireland, especially along the east and south coasts, carry a striking amount of Scandinavian DNA. In fact, research shows that about 10 to 15% of Irish genetic material can be traced back to Viking ancestors, particularly in the areas that were once Norse settlements. This means that for many Irish people today, the Viking bloodline is not just a part of history, it's part of their own story. But how did this genetic legacy survive through the centuries? After the initial Viking raids, the Norsemen established themselves in Ireland, and over time, they blended with the local Irish population. They intermarried, traded, and lived side by side with the Irish people, creating a hybrid culture that combined elements of both Celtic and Norse traditions. This cultural and genetic fusion is still visible in modern Irish DNA, particularly in the descendants of people from these Viking-influenced regions. Interestingly, Viking DNA is most prevalent in areas where the Norsemen established the strongest settlements. For example, Dublin, which was founded as a Viking trading port, has a higher concentration of Scandinavian genetic markers than other parts of Ireland. It's no coincidence that Dublin is also one of the cities where Irish people most strongly identify with their Viking heritage. Those genetic links are tangible. But it wasn't just the Vikings who left their mark. The blending of Norse and Irish bloodlines also brought new cultural practices, language, and even technological advances to Ireland. The Vikings introduced the Irish to new methods of boat building, weaponry, and urban development. In return, the Norsemen adopted aspects of Irish culture, including the Gaelic language and customs. The resulting hybridization produced a population that was genetically and culturally diverse, a reflection of the interconnectedness of both the Irish and Norse peoples. Perhaps the most surprising genetic discovery, however, is that Viking DNA isn't just found in the people of coastal Ireland. The Viking influence has spread throughout the entire island. Studies have shown that the Viking genetic markers can be detected in individuals from rural areas as well, even those with no direct connection to the Viking cities. This suggests that the Norse influence was much broader than previously thought, likely due to intermarriage and the spread of Viking culture through trade and migration. What this means for modern Irish people is fascinating. Many of us may carry genetic markers that link us to a Viking ancestry we never knew we had. These surprising genetic insights reveal a deeper, more complex history of Ireland, one where the Norsemen didn't just leave their swords and shields, they left their DNA, their legacy, and their influence on the culture we know today. As Ireland's genetic story continues to unfold, it becomes clear that the Vikings didn't just shape the history of the island, they helped shape the very people who live there today. The genetic traces of Viking bloodlines are not something of the past, but a living, breathing part of Ireland's present and future. For centuries, the Irish have been proud of their Celtic heritage. The Celts, with their warrior culture, intricate art, and strong traditions, have become synonymous with Ireland's identity. But what if the truth is a bit more complex than we've been led to believe? Did the Irish really descend from the Celts, or is this just a myth that has been passed down through generations? For many years, the idea of the Irish as purely Celtic was accepted without question. We were taught that the Celts arrived in Ireland around 2,500 years ago, bringing with them their distinct language, culture, and way of life. But recent genetic studies have thrown a curveball into this narrative, suggesting that the true story of Ireland's ancestry is far more diverse than we ever imagined. Genetic research has uncovered a fascinating reality. While the Celts certainly played a significant role in shaping Irish culture, they were not the first or only group to settle on the island. In fact, the genetic roots of the Irish people go much deeper, stretching back to the Stone Age, long before the Celts ever set foot in Ireland. Studies of ancient Irish DNA show a mix of genetic markers from various populations that came to Ireland long before the Celts, hunter-gatherers, Neolithic farmers, and even early Bronze Age migrants, all of whom contributed to the genetic foundation of the Irish. So, if the Celts weren't the original ancestors of the Irish, what was their role? The answer lies in the Celtic migration. The Celts didn't arrive in Ireland as a unified group, but rather as a series of waves over several centuries. The first wave, around 500 BC, brought with it the distinct Celtic language and culture, which began to blend with the already established Irish populations. Over time, the Celts and the existing groups fused, creating a unique genetic and cultural landscape that we recognize as Irish today. But what's truly remarkable is that the genetic traces of these early Celtic settlers are still present in modern Irish people. Research has found that a significant portion of the Irish population carries Celtic-specific genetic markers, particularly in the areas of the West and South. These markers reflect the influence of the Celts on Irish culture, language, and even identity. However, these markers are often mixed with older, pre-Celtic markers, revealing the blending of multiple groups over time. This new evidence challenges the long-held belief that the Irish are solely descended from the Celts. Instead, it paints a picture of Ireland as a melting pot of different peoples, cultures, and genetic influences, all of which contributed to the Ireland we know today. The Irish identity is not the result of one singular group or wave of migration, but a culmination of centuries of genetic exchange and cultural assimilation. Perhaps the most surprising discovery in this research is that some of the earliest Irish populations may have had no connection to the Celts at all. Ancient DNA studies have uncovered markers that link the Irish to populations in Europe, such as the Basques, who have been isolated from other European groups for thousands of years. These genetic connections suggest that the Irish may have shared a common ancestry with people living in other parts of Europe long before the arrival of the Celts. So, what does this all mean for the Irish identity today? While the Celts certainly played a key role in shaping Ireland's cultural landscape, they are just one piece of the puzzle. The Irish people are a blend of various ancestral groups, each leaving their mark on the island. Whether it's the ancient hunter-gatherers, the Neolithic farmers, the Vikings, or the Celts, all of these peoples contributed to the rich tapestry of Irish heritage. Ultimately, the answer to the question of whether the Irish truly descended from the Celts is a resounding yes. But it's a yes that comes with a deeper understanding of Ireland's complex genetic and cultural history. The Celts were an important part of that history, but they were not the only influence. The Irish are the product of thousands of years of migrations, invasions, and cultural exchanges, making them one of the most genetically diverse populations in Europe. When you think of Ireland, what comes to mind? Green rolling hills, ancient stone castles, and a rich cultural heritage. But buried within the genetic makeup of the Irish people is an even more surprising legacy, a legacy that links the Irish to ancient civilizations far beyond their shores. Recent breakthroughs in DNA research have uncovered rare genetic markers in the Irish population that reveal fascinating, long-forgotten connections to distant parts of the ancient world. These discoveries are not only rewriting the history of Ireland, but also revealing how interconnected the world was thousands of years ago. While we often think of Ireland as a relatively isolated island on the edge of Europe, ancient populations were far more mobile than we once thought. DNA studies have shown that Ireland was, in fact, a crossroads of ancient migrations and exchanges, with surprising connections to civilizations as far away as the Middle East, North Africa, and even the Mediterranean. One of the most intriguing findings comes from the discovery of rare genetic markers that can be traced back to ancient civilizations in the Mediterranean and the Near East. These markers suggest that the Irish population carries the genetic footprint of early agriculturalists who migrated across Europe and into Ireland around 6,000 years ago. But here's the twist: these genetic markers are also found in populations that lived in ancient Egypt and the Levant, regions that are thousands of miles away from Ireland. How did these ancient connections come about? The answer lies in the waves of migration and trade that connected the distant corners of the ancient world. Around 4,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age, the Mediterranean and the Near East were hubs of trade and cultural exchange. People traveled by sea, trading goods, ideas, and even genes. It's likely that the ancestors of the Irish, along with other populations in Europe, were part of these far-reaching trade networks. What's even more fascinating is that some of the rare genetic markers found in Ireland don't appear anywhere else in Europe, at least not in such high concentrations. These markers suggest that the early inhabitants of Ireland were not just part of broader European genetic trends, but also had unique connections to ancient, now distant civilizations. These genes, passed down through thousands of years, remain hidden in the genetic landscape of modern Ireland, waiting to be discovered. One particularly surprising genetic link found in the Irish population is to the ancient Berbers of North Africa. These Berber genetic markers, which were once thought to be unique to North African populations, have been found in small but significant quantities in some Irish communities. How could this be? Geneticists speculate that this connection may be the result of ancient maritime trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean, linking Europe, North Africa, and even the Iberian Peninsula. The genes of ancient Berber traders, sailors, and farmers may have been carried across these routes, leaving a subtle genetic imprint on populations like the Irish. Perhaps even more astonishing is the discovery of genetic markers linked to ancient Egyptian populations. While there is no direct evidence of ancient Egyptians settling in Ireland, the presence of certain genetic markers suggests that there may have been some form of contact or shared ancestry. This could have been the result of long-distance trade, cultural exchanges, or even migration along the Mediterranean trade routes. The fact that these ancient markers have survived in Ireland's gene pool for thousands of years is a testament to the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations, long before the rise of modern travel and communication. These rare genetic connections to distant civilizations highlight just how much we have yet to learn about our ancient past. They challenge the traditional notion of isolated, self-contained societies and show us that the ancient world was far more connected than we could have imagined. Ireland, once seen as a distant outpost on the fringes of Europe, turns out to be a crucial piece of this vast global network of ancient trade and cultural exchange. What does all of this mean for the Irish people today? It means that the genetic legacy of Ireland is more diverse and complex than we ever realized. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of ancient cultures and civilizations, stretching from the Mediterranean to North Africa and beyond. And while these ancient connections may seem surprising, they only add to the rich and layered history of Ireland, a history that is still being uncovered, one genetic marker at a time. Ireland's history is often viewed through the lens of its rich culture and traditions, but its genetic evolution is just as fascinating, revealing a deeper, more intricate story of the island's past. From the Stone Age to the present day, the genetic makeup of the Irish people has been shaped by migrations, invasions, and cultural exchanges, each contributing to the diverse genetic landscape we see today. The journey of Irish genetics begins in the Stone Age, over 10,000 years ago, when the first humans arrived after the last ice age. These early settlers were hunter-gatherers who made their way to Ireland from mainland Europe as the glaciers began to retreat. Their genes, dark-haired and light-eyed, laid the first foundation for Ireland's genetic pool. These Stone Age populations were among the first to adapt to Ireland's changing landscape, thriving in its forests and coastal regions. The next major shift came with the arrival of Neolithic farmers, around 6,000 years ago. These settlers brought with them not only new farming techniques, but also new genetic material. They were lighter-skinned, with darker hair and eyes, and they intermingled with the indigenous hunter-gatherers, creating a blend of genetic markers that would persist for millennia. This period marks the beginning of a more settled, agricultural society, and the Irish people's first step toward a more organized way of life. By 2,500 years ago, the Celts arrived, bringing their language, customs, and unique genetic markers. However, as we've seen, they weren't the only group to shape Irish genetics. Their arrival represented yet another wave of migration, blending Celtic traits with those already present on the island. The Celts left a strong imprint on Irish culture, but their genetic contribution was just one part of the island's much older population history. The Viking invasions of the 9th and 10th centuries brought another surge of genetic diversity as Norse settlers integrated with the Irish population. These Vikings didn't just raid, they stayed, intermarried, and formed new communities. The genetic markers from these Norse settlers are still visible today, particularly in coastal regions like Dublin, which was once a thriving Viking port. As Ireland entered the modern era, more migrations and invasions shaped its population. English and Scottish settlers, the Cromwellian invasions, and other waves of colonization all left their marks, further diversifying the Irish gene pool. Today, modern Irish DNA is a mosaic of these ancient peoples, a tapestry of hunter-gatherers, farmers, Celts, Vikings, and later invaders. These various genetic threads have created the diverse, yet distinctly Irish, population we know today. Ireland's genetic evolution is not just a story of survival, but one of constant adaptation and interaction. It's a reminder that the people of Ireland are not defined by any single group, but rather by the many cultures and peoples who have called the island home over the centuries. Through these discoveries, we can now better understand the complex, rich tapestry that makes up the Irish people, and we can appreciate that this story is far from over. Ireland, often seen as an isolated island on the edge of Europe, has long been thought to have a distinct and self-contained ancestry. But recent genetic research has uncovered surprising evidence that challenges this notion, revealing a hidden Mediterranean connection in the Irish DNA. These discoveries are shedding new light on the complex history of migration and trade in the ancient world, revealing unexpected links between Ireland and the far-off lands of the Mediterranean. One of the most fascinating aspects of this research is the discovery of genetic markers in the Irish population that trace back to the Mediterranean. These markers suggest that the ancestors of the Irish were not only influenced by Celtic, Viking, and Norse migrations, but were also connected to ancient civilizations from the southern shores of Europe. Specifically, certain genetic markers found in the Irish are strikingly similar to those found in populations from the Mediterranean regions of Italy, Greece, and even North Africa. This Mediterranean link is particularly surprising given the geographical distance between Ireland and these regions. So how did these connections come about? The answer lies in the ancient trade routes and migratory patterns that connected Europe, Africa, and Asia long before the rise of the Roman Empire. The Mediterranean was a hub of trade, culture, and migration, and it's likely that these ancient peoples traveled by sea, carrying not just goods, but also genes across vast distances. One of the key periods of Mediterranean influence on Ireland comes from the Bronze Age, around 4,000 years ago, when the Mediterranean civilizations were at their height. During this time, seafaring peoples were traveling far and wide, exchanging goods, ideas, and cultural practices. It's believed that early farmers from the Mediterranean may have migrated along these trade routes, bringing their agricultural knowledge and, potentially, their genetic legacy to Ireland. Interestingly, these Mediterranean markers are most commonly found in certain regions of Ireland, particularly in the southern and southeastern parts of the island. These areas were once centers of trade and contact, making them prime locations for the exchange of both goods and genetic material. This Mediterranean genetic influence may also explain some of the physical characteristics commonly associated with the Irish population, such as certain variations in eye color, skin tone, and hair texture. But the Mediterranean connection goes beyond just genetics. Studies have found that the ancient Mediterranean peoples also influenced Irish culture, particularly in their art and technological advancements. The intricate metalwork of the Irish Bronze Age, for example, shares similarities with the artistic styles of Mediterranean cultures. This connection suggests that the exchange of ideas and technology went hand in hand with the exchange of genes, further linking Ireland to the broader Mediterranean world. While the Mediterranean influence on Irish DNA is subtle, it's undeniable. These surprising connections reveal the ancient and unexpected ways in which Ireland was integrated into the broader networks of the ancient world. The Mediterranean was not a distant, isolated place for the Irish, it was an active part of their genetic and cultural heritage. The discovery of these hidden links offers a more nuanced understanding of Ireland's past, showing that it wasn't just the Celts, Vikings, or even the early Irish who shaped the island's history, but a far-reaching network of civilizations spanning from the Mediterranean to the North Atlantic. Ultimately, the hidden Mediterranean connection in Irish DNA is a reminder that our past is far more interconnected than we often realize. Ireland, far from being an isolated outpost, was always a part of the greater web of human history. And as we continue to unlock these genetic mysteries, we gain a deeper appreciation for the richness and complexity of Ireland's true origins. Ireland has long been known for its rich mythology and legendary kings, but what if we could trace the royal bloodlines of the Irish back through DNA? Recent genetic studies are doing just that, uncovering the secrets of Ireland's kings and queens, revealing how royal families were intertwined with the genetics of the island, and what these discoveries can tell us about Ireland's past. One of the most fascinating areas of genetic research involves the exploration of royal lineages. Historically, Ireland's kings and queens were believed to come from ancient dynasties, passed down through generations of noble families. However, the question arises, how much of this royal heritage is simply legend, and how much can be traced through the DNA? Recent studies on the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, both of which are passed down through generations, have revealed that many of the royal families in Ireland did indeed have unique genetic markers. These markers often reflect the origins of the early clans and dynasties, showing connections to distant populations from across Europe. While the precise origins of these royal families remain a mystery, genetic research has shed light on the diverse sources that contributed to their ancestral lineage. One surprising finding is that some of Ireland's royal families shared genetic connections with Viking settlers. This discovery is especially significant, considering the Vikings' impact on Ireland during the 9th and 10th centuries. Through these Viking genetic markers, we see how the royal families likely benefited from the cultural and genetic exchange between the Irish and the Norse. In addition to the Vikings, there are genetic links to other European nobility, as well as ancient populations in the British Isles. Some scholars suggest that these royal families were not solely Irish in origin but were part of a broader network of elites that extended across the British Isles and even into France and Scandinavia. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this genetic research is its ability to identify the specific genetic lineages that may have been passed down through Ireland's most famous kings and queens. By studying ancient burial sites and royal tombs, scientists are slowly piecing together the genetic puzzle of Ireland's monarchy, revealing how these lineages have contributed to modern Irish populations. While these discoveries are still in their early stages, they provide a fascinating glimpse into Ireland's royal past. DNA research is allowing us to understand the genetic makeup of Ireland's kings and queens, offering new insights into their origins and how they helped shape the island's rich cultural history. One of the most iconic and unique physical traits often associated with the Irish is red hair. Redheads make up around 10% of the Irish population, and the trait is often seen as a symbol of Ireland's distinctive cultural and genetic heritage. But where did this striking trait originate, and why is it so prevalent in Ireland? New genetic research is finally providing answers to these questions, offering clues about the mysterious origins of Irish red hair. The gene responsible for red hair is called MC1R, melanocortin-1 receptor, and it has been the subject of much study in recent years. While red hair is commonly associated with Celtic peoples, researchers have found that the gene for red hair is much older and more complex than previously thought. It's not just a simple result of Celtic ancestry, it's a feature that likely has deep genetic roots, with connections that span beyond Ireland. Studies have shown that the MC1R gene mutation, which causes red hair, is most common in populations of Northern and Western Europe, particularly in Ireland and Scotland. But why is it so prevalent in these regions? One theory is that the mutation may have offered a survival advantage in ancient times, particularly in regions with less sunlight. The lighter skin tone associated with red hair could have helped early populations in these areas absorb more vitamin D from the sun, which was crucial for survival in a more northern climate. Interestingly, genetic research has revealed that the origins of red hair go even further back in human history. While the trait is most common in the Irish population, it is also found in other parts of Europe and even as far afield as parts of the Middle East. This suggests that the MC1 or gene mutation could have spread through human populations long before the Celts or the Irish as we know them today. Despite the widespread distribution of red hair, Ireland remains the country with the highest concentration of people with red hair. This is partly due to the country's genetic isolation and the historical intermarriage between Celtic tribes, which may have kept the gene prevalent. Today, the gene persists in Irish populations, contributing to one of the island's most enduring symbols. What's truly fascinating is the new insight into how the gene for red hair may have evolved and spread across Europe. Researchers have begun to link the origins of red hair to ancient populations that lived thousands of years ago, perhaps even the first settlers of Ireland. These findings suggest that red hair could be a much older feature of the Irish population than anyone had previously imagined, and that it may have been an important marker of early genetic diversity in the island's history. Ireland's kings and queens were not just rulers, they were central figures in the island's mythology and history. From the legendary kings of the ancient Tuatha Dé Danann to the high kings of Tara, the royal bloodlines of Ireland have long fascinated historians and genealogists alike. But what if we could uncover the true genetic origins of these royal families? Recent advances in DNA analysis are finally allowing us to peek into the genetic secrets of Irish royalty, offering new insights into the ancestry of the island's most prominent families. For centuries, the origins of Ireland's ruling families were thought to be a blend of myth, legend, and oral tradition. However, modern genetic techniques have begun to shine a light on the historical accuracy of these royal lineages. By examining the DNA of individuals from royal tombs, ancient burial sites, and modern descendants, researchers are piecing together the true ancestry of these prestigious families. One of the most exciting revelations is that many of Ireland's ancient royal families share genetic connections with populations from across Europe, particularly the Celts, Vikings, and even the Mediterranean. In fact, some studies have suggested that the Y chromosome markers of Irish royal families match those found in ancient royal bloodlines in the British Isles and Europe. This connection speaks to the complex web of migrations, trade, and cultural exchange that shaped Irish society. Particularly interesting are the connections between the Irish royal families and the Viking invaders. Viking raids and settlements in Ireland between the 8th and 11th centuries had a profound impact on the genetic makeup of the island. The Norse DNA found in Irish royal families indicates that the Vikings didn't just pillage and conquer, they also integrated with the local populations, intermarrying with the native Irish, and creating a unique genetic lineage that influenced the ruling families for generations. Moreover, the genetic studies of these royal lineages have uncovered links to other European nobility, suggesting that the Irish royal bloodlines were part of a larger European aristocracy, one that spanned from the British Isles to Scandinavia and even as far south as the Iberian Peninsula. These genetic clues challenge the view of Ireland as a secluded island, highlighting its important place in the broader European political and social landscape. But what does this mean for modern-day Ireland? It means that the genetic legacy of Ireland's royal families still lives on in the DNA of many Irish people today. Whether you're directly descended from a royal line or simply share a genetic connection to one of the island's ancient kings, these discoveries help us understand the enduring influence of Irish nobility. They also show how deeply intertwined the genetics of the Irish people are with the broader history of Europe and the ancient world. While we may never fully unravel all the mysteries of Ireland's royal bloodlines, modern genetic research is giving us an unprecedented glimpse into the past, offering a new understanding of Ireland's kings and queens. These findings not only enrich our knowledge of Irish history but also remind us of the deep and fascinating connections that bind us to the past. As we uncover the genetic secrets of Ireland's past, we gain a deeper appreciation for its rich and complex history. From the ancient roots of the Irish DNA to surprising Mediterranean connections and royal bloodlines, each discovery helps us understand the island's diverse heritage. If you've enjoyed exploring these fascinating genetic journeys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting insights. Have any thoughts or questions? Drop a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going. Stay curious and keep exploring the amazing stories hidden in our genetic makeup.